At the dawn of the morning, the mountains filled with clouds and mist are like a shy girl, looming. The green trees in the mountains are shady, the spring water is gurgling, and on the green embellishments along the winding mountain road, the inadvertently condensed morning dew wet a teenager's pants, but failed to attract his attention. The young man looked at the direction of the top of the mountain. His dark and tender face seemed to be no more than 15 at most, and his clear eyes flashed with determination. Even though his legs were already sore, he did not stop him. His name is Lian, and he is a member of the ancient peaceful village at the foot of Qingyuan Mountain. Today, he is going to do a big thing, looking for immortals. When Qingyuan Mountain is hidden in the mountain fog, as long as you have a sincere heart and climb to the top of the mountain before the fog clears, you will have the opportunity to meet the mountain god. I heard that once the old man appears, he will bring auspiciousness to the village again. This is a legend that has been passed down from generation to generation in the mountain village. Lian also listened to his grandfather, and his grandfather listened to his great-grandfather. Going further, he will not be clear. Although the teacher in the class once said that this is a feudal superstition lacking scientific evidence, how can the cognition formed since childhood be easily changed? However, despite his perseverance, he was still a teenager after all. When his legs began to tremble uncontrollably, Ang Li had to lean on an ancient Panasonic for a short rest. Looking up, the tall and straight ancient trees, at least tens of meters, stretched out in midair, like the clouds in the sky descending on the mountains, so that the resting teenagers only felt the greatness of creation, but it was like that low profile. How great is the mountain who controls such a creation? It can definitely change the village and make it rich, so that everyone will come back. That's right, this is Lian's true purpose of seeking immortals. With the sweeping of the information age, poor mountain villages can no longer trap people who yearn for it. So people in the village went and went, even his parents. By now, there are only a few dozen households left. Seeing the sad expression on his face every day as the village chief, the grandfather who depended on each other for life, Lian felt extremely uncomfortable. He wanted to help, but his power was too small, so he thought of the legend that his grandfather told. With the yearning and expectation in his heart, Lian once again propped up his small body and continued to walk up the mountain firmly. Later, the sweat and the dew condensed from the morning mist. I don't know who soaked the thin clothes first. Facing the winding, bumpy and long mountain climbing road, despite his faltering steps, the teenager finally stood on the top of the mountain. At the top of the mountain, the sea of clouds and waves rolling under the feet, and the clouds in the distance are lingering and misty, like a fairyland in the sky. In the face of such a grand scene, Lian's eyes drifted in all directions, without the slightest interest in appreciating it. The towering ancient mountains, among the vast sea of clouds, the young man stands on the top of the mountain, just to find the trace of the fairy. But even though those small eyes were wide open, there was not the slightest trace of a mountain god. The feeling of loss filled his heart uncontrollably. Even the gentle cool wind blowing through the mountains and valleys couldn't take away a shred of it. Click at the abnormal sound from behind caught the attention of the lost boy. He could hear it. It was the movement formed by the trampling of dead wood branches. Looking back, he could see vague shadows through the hazy fog. The next second, a behemoth broke through the white barrier and walked out slowly. The boy's eyes suddenly widened, and his body instinctively took half a step back before stopping, but soon, he bowed his knees excitedly, let the shadow cover his body, and did not raise his head. Sir Mountain God! Lian didn't dare to call the creature in front of him a tiger or a white tiger. After all, he had never seen a white tiger as big as his house in his life, even in the news. I have never seen such a pure white color, without a trace of impurities, and even with a faint brilliance. The dazzling golden eyes and the white wings that converged on the back are almost exactly the same as the sculptures enshrined in the ruined temple outside the village, as if the myth is coming again. It just stood there, leaving Ang Li's mind blank, with nothing but piety. Hu Zi looked at the young man in front of him, felt the pure white faith from the other side, and took a deep breath of satisfaction. How long has it been? How long has it been since I felt this kind of pure faith? 10 years, or 30 years? Hu Ziyi can't remember. It seems that since decades ago, the originally stable supply of beliefs has begun to decline like a cliff. Although Hughes is not demanding about belief, after all, as long as someone believes in its existence, it can obtain the most basic source of belief, but the decline in the source of belief over the past few years is obviously more terrifying than imagined. Today, there are only a few 20 or 30 strands of faith links connected to it, and most of them are only the most basic ones. The young man in front of him was originally 2, but it was only for the other party to see himself, and the purity of his beliefs actually increased exponentially. Maybe it's time to go down the mountain. This idea first appeared in Hu Ziyi's mind. Faith is a catalyst for maintaining immortality and becoming stronger. It is an indispensable and important factor, but it cannot form a constraint on it. He is still strong. The white mane undulated slightly along with the breeze, the muscles that concealed the terrifying power slowly exerted force, and the sound of stamping sounded again, taking away the shadow and leaving something behind. It's gone, Ang Li knows. After a long time, the young man stood up, glanced at the depths of the forest for the last time, and headed down the mountain. In the hazy fog, under the golden morning sun, above the boy's head, a white streak was particularly dazzling. In the very depths of the Qingyuan Mountains, there is a natural clear spring. The spring water is clear and sweet, surrounded by greenery, like a fairy pond in the sky. But this place that was supposed to be the living beings in this big mountain, like a holy place, is a forbidden place for all animals living here. The reason is very simple, because this is the habitat of Hughes. However, at this moment, a person was sitting on a boulder covered with moss beside this spring, which is a forbidden area for life. His eyes were quietly overlooking the Qingtan in front of him, motionless, as if it had turned into a part of a boulder, and everything in the outside world had nothing to do with him. The water of the pool is clear and green, as if he has read all the world's conditions and sees through the world's fiery eyes. It is quiet and deep, just like the reflected figure of the young man. Suddenly, the originally calm pool water started to ripple, and a heavy object fell from behind the boy. Hu Ziyi put away his wings and walked slowly behind the young man. Immediately, the most unreasonable top predator who had dominated the Qingyuan Mountains for hundreds of years had his limbs bent, his proud and huge head hanging down, and he knelt down on the ground. Even more pious than Lian just now. Master, I'm a young believer with good aptitude. It's been a long time since I felt such pure faith in human beings. The voice came from the throat of the white tiger, and it was a little abrupt in the depths of this uninhabited mountain. The arrival of Hu Ziyi made the young man, who was focusing on the pool of water, also a little distracted. He tilted his head slightly, revealing half of his profile. I'm leaving. Be calm when I'm not here. The young man's voice was very clear and light, like the wafting morning smoke, but it made Hu Ziyi's big head hang even lower, and the little speculation that had just risen in his heart was also smothered in the bud. Understood, Lord. People living in this world still don't know that on this day, on Qingyuan Mountain, not only a young man with a dream of seeking immortals walked down, but also a burial from an old era. Stepping on the bamboo bridge, bypassing the steam-drenched creek, the figure of a young man is like a dream in the still and dispersed morning mist. With the naked eye, there is no way to see its true face and no trace of it. Even the busy mountain people who get up early in the morning occasionally pass him by, but if they miss a breeze. Liu Chen didn't know or was interested in knowing what other people's lives were like, but he knew that his own was not very normal. Looking back at his childhood, since the day he became conscious, all the things that happened around him were like a movie, very clear, without any interruptions, without any ambiguity. You can review and browse at any time. Liu Chen always thought that, people are like that. I remembered that when I opened my eyes for the first time, everything was so dull. The strange world in front of me didn't make Liu Chen feel the slightest emotion, curiosity, or fear, nothing at all. With the blue sky in front of him and the breeze blowing across his cheeks, Liu Chen maintained a posture, and he didn't know how long it took until a footstep sounded from far to near, until a man picked him up. The man is a traveler. He said that his most precious wealth was freedom, but since he found Liu Chen, everything has changed. He is still running around, but he is not free, because there is a concern behind him, and because running around has a goal. But looking at the child who was growing taller behind him, the man felt that he was still happy, although this child seemed a little different from other children. Too smart, and too calm. When Liu Chen was 5 years old, his life began to change. To be precise, he discovered an unknown foreign object in his head. It was a crystal with a faint brilliance. Even with his intelligence, he didn't know its name and was useless. The influence of the unknown crystal has not yet manifested, but the man has begun to embark on another road, a road of living by lies in order to survive. He took Xiao Liu Chen to meet many people, and made up many identities for him, so many that he may not even remember himself. And Liu Chen doesn't even need to cooperate. The abnormality shown by his natural indifference is more effective than any acting skills. Later, the man really got a lot of money because of this, so that he no longer has to worry about their lives. During this process, Liu Chen also discovered that the mysterious crystal finally changed. The most intuitive manifestation of this change is that it has added a layer of strange links between Liu Chen and those people, like a chain of nothingness, which cannot be seen or touched, but it is real. The chains extracted some kind of power from those people, poured it into the crystals in their minds, and finally, after some kind of filtration, flowed into Liu Chen's body again. And in this kind of change, Liu Chen's role is both a medium and an end point. Later, he began to concentrate on the ability of crystals, and the changes it caused to himself. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, Liu Chen has passed 16, but not the weak crown. In that year, the unknown crystal was completely compatible with him, the inheritance appeared, and time began to stagnate on him. In that year, he finally understood the essence of that power and the horror of creation. The power gained through linking, he called faith. And the faith transformed by the crystals, its power has transcended the ordinary, it can be described as God. 30 years later, the wonder of divine power, he used insight into 7 or 8. The mystery of inheritance, but only a glimpse of it, a little understanding. However, the life of a normal person is only 100 years in a hurry, like a white horse passing a gap, so the man fell. He was lying on the bed, his fingers like dead branches clasped Liu Chen's hand tightly, as if he was reluctant to give up. Looking at the still young and indifferent face in front of him, the grey and white memory fragments floated up and down in his mind, and the man finally said nothing. Looking at the falling tears, Liu Chen was a little puzzled, wondering why the man was crying. Don't they all say that if the elders in the family die, should the living cry? But he didn't want to cry, so why did the man cry? After thinking about it and thinking about it, he still didn't understand it, and it seemed that the world couldn't fully believe what the world said. When the man left, Liu Chen remembered that he always loved to say to him before his death, "You come to the world, you want to see the sun, feel the red dust," and even specially named him Liu Chen. But even though he has gone through all kinds of red dust, his heart is still like a cool breeze. Maybe he never joined the world, and people like him probably shouldn't belong to this mortal world. The only thing that interests Liu Chen now seems to be the limitless inheritance in the crystal, which is not power, but knowledge, which is even more precious and incomprehensible. He needed time, so Liu Chen finally returned to the mountain where the man picked him up, and spent some time creating Huzi, the mountain of Qingyuan. This is his first creation, so Liu Chen is very serious, whether it is the weaving of memory or the construction of strength and form, he has ulterior motives. The characteristic that makes Liu Chen most satisfied with creating creatures is the absolute control he possesses as a source. Moreover, the power obtained by the creatures in various ways will also be fed back to Liu Chen in half through a special form. These powers, filtered through the medium, are easier to absorb than simple beliefs, almost omitting the trouble of conversion. And Liu Chen can also give his power through his own will. The existence of Hu Zi allows him to focus more on the analysis of inheritance. Time flies, centuries after centuries, Liu Chen seems to have forgotten the time. This may be the commonality of the immortals. It wasn't until the long-term lack of belief that time left traces on his body again that he was awakened. Now, looking back, the inheritance has been obtained 8 or 9 times, but I know it is not complete. Looking back at the long river of time, it seems that he is the only one who accompanies Shinto alone. This road is still very long, but life has already begun to come to an end, so Liu Chen decided to set a small goal first, so that the whole world can become the nourishment of his eternal life. Walking in the mountains, his speed did not seem to be fast. Every step he took, he was as down to earth as a mortal man, but after the blink of an eye, there was no trace of him again. After half an hour, Liu Chen, who had not been down the mountain for hundreds of years, couldn't help but feel a strange feeling when he saw the steel city full of people and traffic. However, the incompatibility of being out of the world is still like the past. Liu Chen is very clear that no matter what he wants to do, the first step is to understand. Asking is the fastest way to get an answer, but his inquiry is slightly different from ordinary people. His target was an 18 or 19-year-old girl, who was very beautiful and dressed in cool clothes, and she was chosen for no other reason, just because she was closer to Liu Chen. "You are?" The girl frowned, looking at the boy who appeared in front of her at an unknown time and blocked her way, feeling a little uneasy in her heart. However, her question did not wait for the answer. As the eyes of the two met, the girl's originally agile eyes instantly lost their minds, like a puppet without a soul, just standing on the side of the road. At this moment, Liu Chen's eyes were flickering with a faint light, and countless memory fragments flashed through them like a fast-playing movie. Although it was the first time to do such a thing of reading other people's memories, Liu Chen didn't feel the slightest sense of obscurity. He browsed at a very fast speed. With just a stick of incense, he already knew a lot about the common sense of today's world. Nuclear forces, intercontinental cruise guidance, satellites. As each word entered his mind and learned what it represented, Liu Chen couldn't help but admire the horror of inheriting wisdom. During the hundreds of years he had been in hiding, on this planet called the Blue Core, various forces had undergone several shuffles, and there were countless wars, big and small. But in such a difficult environment, the rise of the technology tree can be called science fiction. Countless things that were never even imagined in Liu Chen's era were created one after another, and even because of 2 terrifying weapons, the humans who loved to compete have entered a long-lost period of peace. Today, the world is clearly divided into 4 regions, which are jointly controlled by the 16 counties of the 4 countries, and the strength far exceeds Liu Chen's expectations. His eyes swept across the girl in front of him again, and the other party immediately rushed towards a large passing truck as if caught by evil. Although the truck driver wanted to dodge, it was too late. After a series of screams, Liu Chen also left. Those technological powers chasing miracles made him have to hide himself more carefully, but it didn't change the goal he just set. Just being an ordinary girl is naturally not enough to satisfy Liu Chen, so for a while, he began to focus on those talents in different positions and different regions, but in order to be more secure, the hunting scope has also become extremely broad. Shenyu Kingdom is a giant that controls the entire eastern region and accepts worship from the 4 counties. In this big country, in addition to ordinary law enforcement agencies, there is a special existence, the National Security Bureau. The National Security Bureau, also known as the Special Incident Handling Unit, does not accept orders from anyone except members of the royal family and is completely self-directed. The main daily task is to intervene immediately and take a strong takeover when there is an incident that ordinary law enforcement agencies cannot solve alone, or that has too much impact. And during the mission, all departments must cooperate with them unconditionally. The power is so great that it is terrifying in the territory of Shenyu Kingdom. At this time, in the luxuriously decorated office of the National Security Bureau headquarters, Director Lu Guozheng was looking at his nephew with a serious face. "Qi Ming, I don't want to force you either, but it has been half a month since Mr. Lu's accident, and the pressure on me is very high. So far, 2 princes have come to speak. You are the main person in this matter. Person in charge, if there is no further progress, let alone you, even me, will be punished." Lu Qiushan's tone did not sound stern, but the aura he exuded and the invisible pressure brought about by his seriousness were enough to make ordinary people panic. "Director, give me another half a month. Although this matter is a bit complicated, I will definitely check it out." Hearing his own uncle's words, although Lu Kaiming's face remained unchanged and he made his promise, he was mostly helpless. This month, people all over the country have committed strange suicides. After reaching a certain level, they naturally attracted the attention of their National Security Bureau. But before they could start the investigation, Lu Lao, the country's newest weapon, the main person in charge of the Sun Cannon project, also encountered the impact of this abnormal event. Suicide by pulling a gun. The death of such characters instantly raised this abnormal event to a new level. Almost all of the National Security Bureau was dispatched, and he, the default successor of the director's position, also naturally became the general responsible for this incident. However, the development of the next thing far exceeded Lu Kaiming's expectations. After checking the information of all suspected victims in China, and cracking every frame and every doubt, they still made no progress. Every victim seems to have fallen into evil. After staying in place for a long time, they commit suicide by various means. The means are so cruel that they leave no room for themselves at all. Speaking from the bottom of my heart, let alone half a month, even if it is half a year, Lu Kaiming is not at all sure that he will be able to find out about this matter. However, even though he had no confidence in his heart, he still dared not reveal the slightest bit. Lu Kaiming really understands the temperament of his uncle. With him, you can fail, but you must not give up lightly, otherwise you will only be looked down upon and belittled by him. The other party will retire in a few years. As the most promising junior, even if he fails, he can't make mistakes. Okay, I'll give you another half a month, I will withstand the pressure above, you can just let it go. I don't expect you to find out this matter completely, but you can't make no progress like now. Otherwise, your ability to do things will probably be questioned by your subordinates. Looking at the eldest nephew who was full of energy in front of him, Lu Qiushan's attitude was indeed similar to Lu Kaiming's expectation, although it meant beating, reading www.yukanshu.com, but it also made him secretly relieved in his heart. Understood, Director. If there is nothing else, then I'll go to work first. Well, let's go. After exiting the director's office, Lu Kaiming carefully closed the door, and then his face became gloomy. Although it took another half a month, if it continues like this, the final impact will definitely be very unfavorable. He must think of a way to break the current deadlock. At least he can no longer be passive as he is now. Tianhe County, Anhua City. Although it is already late at night, for the teenagers in this metropolis, the nightlife has just begun. In the night reading room of a library, the culprit who gave the entire NSA a headache was quietly flipping through a book called Myths and Talks. His speed was very fast, and the pages of the book were turned with a rustling sound. Even if he described it with 1 eye and 10 lines, it seemed a little euphemistic. Soon, a book came to an end, and Lu Chen put it aside. There, at this time, more than 20 myths of various types have been accumulated, almost all of them here. Lu Chen waved his hand, divine power surged in his hand, all the books automatically returned to their original positions, and he also stood up, stepped out, and completely disappeared here. The administrator, who seemed to be dozing off, also woke up at this time, glanced around in confusion, and began to continue his own work. The camera above the head did not record any abnormality in the picture just now, and even the books on the bookshelf seemed to have never moved. There are no traces left here. The young man who just stayed here quietly reading a book is like an insane dream. Yongzia's colorful clothes point to the Green Mountain, and the Shili Gallery is like a fairy. Shenmian Mountain, in the territory of Shenwu Kingdom, has always been known as the unparalleled Holy Land in the world, the world's first immortal mountain. It is rumored that there were immortals in ancient times, and they settled down at the foot of this mountain, so it was named Shenmian Mountain. The scenery on Shenmian Mountain can be enjoyed all year round. Enjoying flowers in spring, avoiding the heat in summer, watching leaves in autumn, watching snow in winter, watching the sunrise over the sea of clouds, stargazing, and riding above the sea of clouds, the magnificent golden-roofed buildings are like a palace in the sky, thus attracting countless visitors. Today, Shenmian Mountain, as always, is full of people, and there are countless tourists who go up the mountain, especially when it is close to dusk. Everyone who comes here wants to climb the mountain as soon as possible to see the picturesque and dreamy sunset. However, not everyone was in high spirits. In the long stream of climbers, a pretty girl in her early 20s looked a little unhappy. Even the Qunli Rongqi along the way could not dispel the rich sad look on her face. Yuling, don't think about that heartbroken man. Who hasn't met a few scumbags in this life? Hurry up, be happy, I'm here to relax with you today, not to look at your picture. Bitter-faced. Beside the girl, there was a cute girl with long hair about the same age. Seeing her appearance, she immediately consoled her with feigned anger. He showed a smile that was uglier than crying. Hearing Lin Xian's comfort beside him, and thinking of the man who had been with him for less than 2 months, Chu Yuling shook her head in her heart. The relationship between him and that man is not so deep yet, and there are other reasons why he frowns along the way. She originally worked in a tea restaurant. Although she was just an ordinary waiter with a low salary, she could hear many interesting true stories from customers in various industries. And when she heard the story of the local top villain Sun Guo bullying others, she was filled with righteous indignation, and she scolded a few words angrily. As a famous gang leader, when he heard that someone dared to scold him, he was naturally not prepared to let him go easily. Fortunately, Chu Yuling's boss not only has some connections, but is also a good person. After learning the news in advance, he asked him to leave there quickly. However, although she had fled temporarily, the thought of a villain looking for her every day made Chu Yuling panic. After hiding in the hotel for 2 days, she was really uncomfortable, so she called her best girlfriend and came to this famous mountain to relax. However, she naturally couldn't tell Lin Xian about these things, because it was of no use other than making the other party worry with her. I see. Do you see me as a fragile person in my heart? Let's go, it's late, but I won't be able to see the sunset. She reached out and patted Lin Xian's little hand off, and a smile appeared on Chu Yuling's face. She decided to temporarily suppress her worries. After all, she came to relax this time. Right, it looks good when you smile like this. After watching the sunset, maybe you can meet a handsome guy. The two girls were chatting and laughing as they climbed up the mountain, but before they took a few steps, Chu Yuling suddenly felt terrified. It was like being stared at by a terrifying beast. She hurriedly stopped and looked around in surprise, but there was nothing unusual except for the tourists who climbed the mountain. What's wrong? Lin Xian asked suspiciously from the side. Nothing. Chu Yuling shook her head, treating it as an illusion. At this time, near the top of the mountain, a young man's figure suddenly appeared without any movement, like a ghostly ghost. Lu Chen looked back with some doubts, his eyes seemed to pass through the space barrier of the mountains and fell on Chu Yuling, who was on the road again. This woman is a bit special. Although he didn't deliberately hide himself just now, mortals shouldn't have any awareness of him. Is this innate perception ability a so-called cultivation genius? Withdrawing his gaze, Liu Chen stepped out again, and his figure slowly disappeared. He stopped here not because of this woman, but because of another life form hidden near the top of the mountain. According to the sense of breath, Liu Chen's figure began to flicker in the mountains. After that, there was no road under his feet. It was all rugged mountains and dense forests, but this did not hinder him in the slightest. A minute later, an apparently artificially modified cave appeared in front of Liu Chen's eyes. He didn't stop at his feet and walked in directly. The inside of the cave was dark, very narrow at first, and only able to communicate with people. After walking for dozens of steps, it suddenly became clear. Looking up, the interior is a relatively natural cave, in which you can see many artificial carvings, stone tables, stone chairs, stone platforms, etc. If there are still some traces left by fireworks, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com looks a bit like a fairy house. Looking at it from a distance, deep inside the cave, on a platform that seemed to be cast by nature, an old man who looked over 70 years old was sitting quietly with his legs crossed. And it was this person who attracted Liu Chen here. Stepping out one step, Liu Chen came to the old man in an instant, but because of the huge gap in strength, even if the distance between the two was less than 1 meter at this time, the old man in front of him didn't notice it at all. The old man has a long face, looks a little thin, his face is full of wrinkles, his eyes are closed, and he seems to be trying to do something. Looking down, even though he was in a cave, he was still neatly dressed, not sloppy, and his straight waist made it hard to believe that this was a person who had entered the ancient world. And the reason why Liu Chen was interested in this man was definitely not because of his weird way of life and behavior, but because he felt the meager spiritual energy fluctuations in this old man. Yes, there is spiritual energy in this world. Although it is so weak that it is almost undetectable, it does exist. On the dragon veins of some famous mountains and rivers, the concentration of aura is several times that of other places. However, with this level of spiritual energy, it would be difficult for an ordinary person to do the most basic foundation building without external help. The old man in front of him, although there are spiritual energy fluctuations in his body, is also the most superficial, the kind that barely incorporates spiritual energy into his body, and is still 108,000 miles away from the real foundation. However, even so, it was enough to make Liu Chen interested. Before seeing this old man, he really didn't know that there were cultivators other than him in this world, even if the other party was so weak that he was almost incomparable to ordinary people. Different. This person's memory should have some value. What happened in this world? After carefully reading the old man's memory, even Liu Chen couldn't help but ask questions in his heart, but obviously, no one here could answer him. The old man's name is Gu Qing, and he comes from a family that has been cultivating immortals for generations. According to the records in his family's ancient books, in the untraceable past, his ancestors once came out of existences like moving mountains and seas. Anyway, in the recent hundreds of years of detailed records, this family has not even owned a real foundation-building cultivator, not one. In the end, when there was no way out in the journey of cultivating immortals, the family also began to gradually switch to shopping malls. Although it is not good to cultivate immortals, in terms of business, the generations of the family have very old eyes, and every time they can grasp the correct investment direction and make a big profit. Slowly, they became richer and richer, and even almost forgot their original intentions until Gu Qing was born. Before his death, the elders in his clan commented that this child was born to cultivate immortals. When he was catching Zhou since he was a child, Gu Qing clinging to a dilapidated method of absorbing qi handed down from his family, and when he grew up, under the guidance of his elders, he became deeply infatuated with the way of cultivating immortals. However, due to the lack of spiritual energy in heaven and earth, and the method he cultivated was too inferior and incomplete, Gu Qing had not gained anything for the first 20 years. But he never gave up. In the end, at the age of 35, he successfully channeled spiritual energy into his body. The thrill of becoming stronger makes Gu Qing nostalgic to this day. But it is a pity that the meager spiritual energy, in addition to making his body stronger, cannot meet the standard of foundation building at all. Stuck on this first step. Even if he later found this treasured place and lived in the Four Seasons, it would still be of no avail. If nothing else happened, this devout seeker would sit here until he died. Liu Chen looked at the old man named Gu Qing in front of him. He didn't care about the experience of the other party, but it was the legends left in his family that made him more interested. But that kind of ancient retrospection is not what he should do now. Recalling his original plan, this Gu Qing seems to be able to play a little role. Fortunately, he understood the particularity of the other party from the very beginning, so compared to other people, Liu Chen had to be much more careful when looking at his memory, and he did not directly turn the other party into a fool. Now, all it takes is a little modification. Time flies, the sun slowly sets, and soon it is dusk. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking out, you can see thick clouds and mists entrenched in the sky, and the setting sun can only take a little space to shoot out strips of crimson rays, like fish swimming in the deep sea, occasionally rolling with golden scales. And its shape is constantly changing, sometimes like of cotton, sometimes like waves on the river. They change so naturally, so quickly, so strangely, so many climbers are a little crazy. On the golden-roofed building on the top of the mountain, a young man seemed to have been standing for a long time, but he did not attract anyone's attention. Looking at the red glow of the sky, feeling the magnificence of heaven and earth, Liu Chen no longer hesitated, slowly raised his hands, and started his plan to create a god. I saw that the originally calm cloud layer on the horizon suddenly began to violently toss, setting off layer after layer of cloud waves, like an angry dragon, roaming freely in it. This anomaly naturally quickly attracted the attention of the tourists below. With the constant exclamations, most people hurriedly took out their mobile phones to record this rare sight. "Look, what is that in the sky?" someone suddenly called out. Countless tourists heard the sound and looked at the top of their heads, and then they couldn't help but stare wide-eyed and stood there in a daze. I saw that above the churning scarlet clouds, a majestic and vast door that was about to break through the sky appeared slowly. The giant gate is blue and deep, made of colored glass, brightly decorated, and made of precious jade. Dozens of marshals of the town were placed on both sides. One of them wore a helmet and armor, holding a mill and holding a scorpion. There were more than a dozen gods in gold armor, each with a halberd and a whip, swords, so mighty. "Any one of you slap me in the face, I'm not dreaming." The peak was silent, and someone's voice trembled. "Don't be stupid, there is no group dreaming. The ancestors of the Zhang family are on top, and I actually saw the gods. It's amazing." Someone replied after looking around. "Do you think this is an illusion created by high technology?" There were also attempts to make a reasonable analysis in the crowd, but they were quickly questioned. Then the degree of authenticity is too high. It really has such high technology. Would you use it here to play if you have nothing to do? It must have been classified as a military secret long ago. The discussion in the crowd gradually grew louder, and at this time, Liu Chen, who was above the golden top, was also holding a ball of golden light in his right hand. There is a new consciousness in it, but it is not created with the help of divine power, but an alternative life that wraps a part of Liu Chen's soul. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. It is similar to the avatar, but different from the avatar. He is both a part of Liu Chen and a brand new individual. The reason why he is so special is because the role he plays is the most important, but Liu Chen is a person who will not believe in anyone except himself, which is why this new existence is created. It took Liu Chen a week to make it, and it also put him into a rare period of weakness. Fortunately, now, it has entered the final step, and it is only a matter of creating a suitable image for it. With a thought in Liu Chen's heart, the golden ball of light instantly flew towards the huge door in the air at a speed that was difficult to grasp with the naked eye. In an instant, thousands of golden lights bloomed from behind the door, causing many tourists below to close their eyes subconsciously. However, the strange thing is that although the golden light is shining, it is not dazzling, so those who are curious and bold all raise their heads. In the golden light, a towering figure appeared in the sky, and you could see a golden dragon robe, wearing a supreme holy body, with a domineering face. What more? The eyes are bright, the majesty is 10 directions, shocking everything. His hands are placed on both sides of the back of his waist, his cheeks and beards grow on both sides, his eyebrows are horizontal and vertical, his emperor's face is stern, and his face looks like he is 40 years old. Just one glance, whether it is on the mountain or down the mountain, as long as anyone who sees this scene, they will kneel and bow to the ground involuntarily, without the power of God, just like substance. This is, what's going on, why should I kneel down? Almost all the people who were kneeling on the ground had the same question in their hearts, but before the question continued to ferment, a brilliant voice resounded through the heavens and the earth, like a murmur from the avenue. The 3 disasters that destroy the world have disappeared, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will return. We will wake up in the place where we slept, and we will connect all worlds, and all worlds will welcome them. When the lingering sound dissipated, the golden light above their heads disappeared, and everyone felt their whole body loosened. The invisible pressure that forced them to kneel suddenly dissipated as if it had appeared, but even so, no one raised their heads immediately. The sage emperor appeared and announced to the heavens that the spiritual energy was about to revive, and the gods were about to wake up. Any one of these things has a great conflict with the 3 views they have established since childhood. The shock inside was beyond words, and at the same time, everyone's brains fell into a brief downtime. Until a few seconds later, with the sound of a little voice, the entire Shenmian mountain completely began to boil. It's so cool, who is this great god? Forget it, no matter who it is, I'm already deeply in love with him, so domineering. Although I only saw it once, that image doesn't seem to be much different from the legendary Haoshan god. It turns out that the legendary gods really exist. Does that mean that people can really cultivate into gods? Sure, didn't you hear that? The spiritual energy is about to recover, and that stuff is a must-have in all immortal cultivation novels. Damn it, resign when you go back, beat up that boss, I'm going to counterattack. Countless discussions formed waves of sound waves, making this originally quiet evening become extremely noisy. And looking at the boiling crowd below, Liu Chen nodded with satisfaction. This deity, here we come. At this time, a middle-aged voice suddenly came from behind him, his eyes moved back. It was the majestic sage emperor who was above the clouds just now, but at this time, his figure had changed to the size of a normal person, and he was quiet. Standing behind Liu Chen. Feeling that the filtered power of faith began to flow into his body, Liu Chen did not turn his head, but said plainly, in the future, you will be Haoshan, in charge of the Haoshan Divine Department of the Eastern region. You can choose the members of your choice, and I will help you create it. When the time is right, I will open up Haoshan Divine Court. At that time, you will need to suppress this world with invincible funds and plunder. A space for all beliefs to exist. Understood. There was a seriousness in Haoshan's voice behind him. Feeling the power gradually filling his body again, Liu Chen didn't stop. He pressed lightly against the void below with one hand, and the divine power surged frantically, evolving into a monstrous spiritual energy, shrouding the entire Shenmian mountain. The many tourists who were talking frantically below suddenly felt a refreshing feeling, like a breeze that could take away their worries. What was that just now? Did you feel the wind? Yet, it's like taking a cold bath and drinking a bowl of ginseng soup. My whole body feels a lot more relaxed. Are you too? I also feel it. It's amazing. I've climbed this mountain no less than 10 times, and I've never experienced such a thing. You said it wouldn't be aura. Didn't the great just say that the aura will be revived? Fuck, hurry up and take a few more sips, maybe you can prolong your life. No, I decided to live on the mountain, and I won't go down. I remember that there is a temporary residence on this mountain. No, I have to go grab it quickly, or it will be gone when it's too late. People's topics began to shift and become more fanatical. Above, after the baptism of this wave of spiritual energy, Liu Chen could clearly feel that the purity and quantity of belief had been raised to a new level, and as the spiritual energy covered the entire Shenmian mountain, he also stopped the movements in his hands. Haoshan, you stay here temporarily to maintain the aura on the mountain, and at the same time plan the Haoshan divine system. Haoshan responded, and then took the place of Liu Chen. The holy body rose into the air, the golden dragon robe swayed with the wind behind him, his face was condensed, his domineering arrogance continued to leak out, his majesty was endless, and he raised his hand. Controlled the movement of the spiritual energy of the entire Shenmian mountain. The words were divided into 2 parts. At this time, at the entrance of a hidden cave near the top of the mountain, an old man was tearing in his eyes, and his face was frantically feeling the majestic spiritual energy around his body. Trembling. When he just retreated, Gu Qing was awakened by the Haoran Tianyan. After hearing his holy words, he fell into self-doubt. He once thought that his obsession with cultivating immortals was too deep and he had auditory hallucinations. But now, feeling the aura across the surface of his body like a feather, he doesn't even know how to express his emotions. That feeling is beyond words. The flow of spiritual energy is from top to bottom, which means that the source is still there. How could Gu Qing let go of such a once-in-a-century opportunity? He has been in seclusion here for nearly 20 years, and today is the first time he left voluntarily. Even though he is over 70 years old, when he bursts out with all his strength, Gu Qing's speed is still comparable to those of professionally trained special forces. Under his feet, he quickly walked through the shaded path that was already covered by weeds, but within 20 minutes, he saw the tourists whose faces were still in shock. After a while, this 70-year-old man with a fast-moving, excited face and a striking expression also attracted the attention of many tourists, many of whom were young and strong, trying to keep up, but soon they were dumbfounded to discover that he couldn't keep up with this wrinkled old man who seemed to have half his feet in the coffin. And although he has attracted countless followers along the way, at this time, Gu Qing doesn't care about the strange eyes around him. In his heart, there is nothing that is more important than his breakthrough. Under the continuous astonished gaze, Gu Qing successfully climbed to the top of the mountain in only 10 minutes. When he came to the top of the entire Shenmian mountain, he took a deep breath with some greed, as if he wanted to swallow all the rich spiritual energy into his stomach. After all, he had been waiting for this moment for too long. From a young man to an old man, his black hair turned pale, Gu Qing was all the time, not imagining the day when his body was wrapped in rich spiritual energy. Now, he finally got it. Faced with such an opportunity, he didn't want to wait another minute and a second, and immediately sat on the ground, madly absorbing spiritual energy and starting to break through. Liu Chen lowered his head and looked down at Gu Qing below, raised his right hand slightly, stretched out his index finger, a ray of divine power suddenly floated out slowly, and flew towards the other party. After approaching a certain distance, he drilled in directly from Tianling. With divine power entering his body, Gu Qing trembled, but he was not flustered at all, and he couldn't help but secretly say with joy, "It's finally here, Xiantian Yuki." And as the so-called Xiantian Yuki entered the body, under Gu Qing's deliberate guidance and use, his strength also began to rise rapidly, and soon, he reached the legendary state of innate foundation building. The breakthrough of the realm also caused his body to undergo drastic changes. First, his head was full of white hair, which miraculously turned from white to black, and then the wrinkled skin changed again as if he had undergone a seamless stretching operation. Firm and elastic. In the blink of an eye, this old man, who was just over 70 years old, turned into a middle-aged man who was no more than 40 at most. And looking at Gu Qing, whose body was changing below, Liu Chen's young face that was always looking down on all beings with indifference, a faint smile seemed to be fleeting. The gifts of the gods always make people dazzled and fascinated, and at the same time, they can't help but ignore the side effects it brings. And Liu Chen's help is naturally more expensive. Divine power is not different from spiritual energy. Its level is not only several times higher, but each strand contains his unique origin characteristics. In simple terms, cultivators absorb this power to build foundations, born to be controlled by the source. As for the return of the power obtained from the subsequent training, although it is not as good as a life completely created by divine power, which is directly exploited in half, it is still enough to reach 1/10. This share is still very cost-effective when only a little divine power is spent, and there is no need to laboriously weave memories. Perhaps from an onlooker's point of view, doing so seems a bit unnecessary. After all, now you only need to use the accumulation of myths left in this world earlier. You can frantically search for a lot of beliefs to become stronger, but Liu Chen has never liked to put all his bets on one treasure, and leaving no loopholes is his criterion. Being prepared is the way he behaves. He is not perfect, but he will try his best to perfect the existing plan. At this time, on the top of Shenmian mountain below, since Gu Qing appeared just now, there has been no end to the discussion about him in the crowd. It was normal at the beginning, just some remarks about the hermits in the mountains, who avoided the world, but as Gu Qing sat cross-legged on the spot and broke through in front of them, after the body regained its youth in an exaggerated way, that the various discussions that filled the top of the mountain seemed to be choked by some invisible force, except for the occasional breeze, which was terrifyingly silent. There's no way this can be done. Although the image of the Holy Emperor just now and the announcement to all the worlds are shocking enough, in comparison, the miracles caused by a real person standing in front of him are even more real. And Gu Qing, who had successfully made a breakthrough, felt the power in his body and the young and vigorous vitality, and closed his eyes even more with enjoyment. This kind of power fills the whole body, and it seems that every move can crack the mountain and crack the wonderful taste, just like the craziest drug, constantly stimulating his central nervous system, making him stay in place for nearly a minute, until a young and a timid voice sounded in his ear. "That, EX Senior? Are you all right?" Gu Qing opened his eyes and found that the speaker was a young man in his early 20s with short black hair. Although the other party had some concerns and fears in his voice, the expectation and yearning in his eyes were also concealed. "Not live." Gu Qing, who has been a lifelong seeker, can't see through this look, and he also appreciates this kind of person who dares to take the first step and dare to fight for it, but some things are not guaranteed to be achieved by fighting for them. Glancing at the young man, he shook his head secretly in his heart. Talent can sometimes determine the fate of many people. In Gu Qing's eyes, youth is not without talent, but it is not enough for him to spend energy to cultivate. What's more, he just needed time to get used to his young body and strength. Thinking of this, Gu Qing was ready to leave this crowded place and return to the cave where he lived to feel at ease and secure his realm. However, the moment he raised his eyes and glanced at the crowd, his eyes suddenly stopped on a young girl. As the eyes of the two met, the girl immediately lowered her head in fear, but Gu Qing did not look away, but still stared at each other. Gifted. At this moment, in Gu Qing's mind, this is the only word he can think of. It was the first time he had seen such a talented junior in so many years. Although he had not seen many people since he lived in seclusion, he was still amazed by the girl's talent. Just thinking about it for a while, Gu Qing already made a decision in his heart. When he saw his foot move, the whole person suddenly shot out like an electric light. The speed was more than 3 times faster than when he came, and the crowd was squeezed out in an instant. Came to the girl's side. And those ordinary people who were blocking the way in front of them didn't even have time to react, and they were knocked to the ground one after another, causing the quiet mountaintop to sound a pain and wailing sound again. As for the girl, looking at the expert who suddenly appeared in front of her, she was also stunned by fright. She let the other party pick her up like a chick and headed down the mountain, and she could hear faintly behind her. Girlfriend screamed anxiously. Standing on the dome, Liu Chen, who was watching this scene, also lost a little divine power in his hands. For him, mortals are short-sighted, and it is not difficult to manipulate. What is difficult is that in the overall situation of the game, every step, every link, can't make a little mistake, otherwise, driven by the butterfly effect, it is very likely to cause damage in the later stage. Irreparable loss. So, he was very careful. With Gu Qing's current speed, ordinary people can't be as fast as anyone else, even with a person in his hand, it's still amazingly fast. On the way down the mountain, the girl who was being carried could only feel the sound of the wind in her ears, and she couldn't even open her eyes, let alone see the things around her. And about 10 minutes later, she was let go, and she looked up blankly, and the surrounding environment had become unfamiliar. In front of him was a cave that was as tall as one person, obviously artificially decorated, and the expert hermit who caught her just looked back at her and walked into the cave. The girl glanced at the dark and faint mountains and forests around, swallowed secretly, and finally followed. Stepping into the entrance of the cave, she soon followed Gu Qing in front and entered the cave where she lived. It was a little different from what she had imagined before. In this hidden cave, there was no strange smell, but the air was it is fresh and seems to have a special device for circulating the air. After entering the cave, Gu Qing came directly to a sunken wall, reached out and pressed lightly on it, a hidden cabinet was revealed, and a black satellite phone lay quietly inside. He skillfully entered a number, and only after waiting for less than 3 seconds, a middle-aged voice came from the opposite side. "Hey, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com Third Grandpa, do you need anything? Little Tazi, something has happened on Shenmian Mountain, and there should be some official people involved soon. I don't care what they do, but don't let them disturb me, you know." Although he has become younger, Gu Qing's voice still has an elder's tone. "Third Grandpa, what's your voice?" This time, the opposite party did not immediately respond as usual, but asked with some doubts. "I made a breakthrough." "Well, you should receive the news soon, remember my words, I don't want to be approached tomorrow." When talking about his breakthrough, Gu Qing's voice also contained a hint of emotion. "Breakthrough? Third Grandpa, what do you mean? You have established a foundation." The originally steady voice on the other side, after hearing the news, was also uncontrollably full of surprise, followed by a burst of urgent concern. "Third Grandpa, then you should go back to the clan group. No one can threaten you here. I just broke through, and I still need time to stabilize the realm. You are not too young, why are you still so boring? Also, although I am the first, I will never be the last. The world is going to change, you just do what I say, and you should receive the news soon." In Gu Qing's voice, there was already a little impatience at this time, and the middle-aged man on the other end of the phone seemed to be a little angry when he heard his third grandfather, and hurriedly promised, "Understood, Third Grandpa, don't worry, I won't let them disturb you." Snapped. As the phone hung up, Gu Qing also looked behind him. Not far away, the girl was standing there, looking overwhelmed, like a criminal awaiting trial. "My name is Gu Qing. I'm a Taoist cultivator. Your talent is very good. You will follow me in the future. By the way, what's your name?" Without any unnecessary nonsense, Gu Qing directly stated his purpose, and then asked the girl's name. My name is Chu Yuling, So, what is Xiaoxian? Although after a short period of adaptation, Chu Yuling's mood has calmed down a lot, but in the end, she is just an ordinary girl. Although she usually reads dramas and novels, she mainly focuses on the hero and heroine falling in love. Not very deep. Cultivation of immortals mainly lies in breaking the original shackles. Although we are only mortals, but if we have succeeded in our cultivation, we can also go up to 9 days to hold the moon. You will naturally understand when you set foot on this road in the future. Okay, let's stop talking. There is food in the cave, you can pick it up yourself. I just broke through, it still needs time to stabilize. I will officially start teaching you in a few days. Gu Qing waved his hand and ended the conversation. After that, regardless of Chu Yuling, he walked to the stone platform on his own, sat down with his knees crossed, and soon fell into a special state. Seeing this, Chu Yuling looked at the darkened sky in the passage outside the cave, opened her mouth, and seemed to want to say something, but she finally gave up. After hesitating for a while, she found a corner near Gu Qing and sat down, staring blankly at the inexplicably extra master in front of her, not knowing what she was thinking. At the same time, Liu Chen, who was standing on the top of the mountain, also opened his eyes. Before you know it, the night has almost shrouded the entire mountain, the old pine is solemn, the stones are dim, and the shadows are whirling. Standing on the top of the mountain, he looked up and looked into the distance, unable to distinguish the starlight. The dark gauze wrapped everything in the mountain, and the wind blew gently, faintly like a stream in the air. Before Gu Qing broke through, the foundation building was like a loft in the sky for everyone. It was just a legend. Then after a breakthrough, does it take time to adapt? In fact, even Liu Chen doesn't know the real answer to this question. However, it takes time for his original divine power to be completely dissolved in the body of a cultivator. Therefore, there is the so-called adaptation period. And if he wants this saying to spread far and wide and become completely true, he still needs to do something. While thinking about it, his feet moved slightly, and his originally clear figure became illusory again until it completely disappeared. Right now is just the beginning, there are still too many things about him, for example, a reasonable way to spread. After all, no matter how idle he is, it is impossible to help nearly 10 billion people in the whole world build foundations one by one. Haoshan, who lives high in the void, looked at the position where Liu Chen disappeared, bowed his head slightly, and then resumed his own work. His eyes easily covered the entire Shenmian mountain, monitoring all the variables. This night is doomed to be sleepless. Due to the development of modern information networks and the fact that Shenmian Mountain is a tourist attraction, there was a world-shattering vision that night. The news of the rejuvenation of the Hermit Master after breaking through was like a prairie fire, and it spread wildly throughout the eastern region. In addition, there are various videos to corroborate, the authenticity is full, and the linkage between the other two breaking news is also super high, and the internet has completely exploded. Countless melon-eating people wrote and discussed heatedly. News editors and self-media people work overtime overnight, and some even chartered cars across long distances to rush towards Shenmian Mountain in order to obtain first-hand information. And the internet celebrities are naturally unwilling to lag behind. Driven by these public figures, if there is no accident, it is conceivable that within a few days, this place will become a holy place in the hearts of the entire eastern region netizens, and even spread to the other 3 regions. However, it is obviously impossible that there will be no accidents. A few hours later, when the first batch of professionals eating this bowl of rice came to the foot of Shenmian Mountain in the dark, carrying various tools, large and small, they saw not pilgrims from all over the world, but pilgrims from all over the world. It is a highly guarded professional armed force. Without any hesitation, as long as you have a little brain, after seeing this scene, you will secretly take a few photos, then turn your head and leave. After all, the appearance of these people means that the government has intervened, and no one will be stupid enough to fight against such a behemoth, because it is no different from killing. Moreover, Just the news that the armed forces blocked Shenmian Mountain is enough to make them eat a lot, which makes these people even more unnecessary to take risks. With so many available factors combined, I am afraid that tomorrow morning, all kinds of articles, news, and theme posts will fill the headlines. But all of this has nothing to do with Liu Chen for the time being. At this moment, he did not return to the familiar Qingyuan Mountains, but went to another direction, a place he had never been to before. He stepped through the countryside and towns, and finally came to a bustling big city, and he still didn't stop until he saw a high-rise building marked with the Gu Group. Although he didn't hide it deliberately, even though Liu Chen entered from the main entrance generously, he didn't attract the attention of those high-tech defense systems, as if he was just a wandering soul. I have to say that the ability to read memory is really useful. Walking in this unfamiliar high-rise building, Liu Chen's goal is very clear. In just a moment, he passed all the security. Come to the deepest part of the building, in front of a safe that has been protected by several layers. And these defensive measures, forged by the wisdom of generations of ancestors, did not play the slightest role in the face of an extraordinary existence that cannot be understood with common sense. It opened slowly in front of Liu Chen. This is not any gold and silver jewelry, or information similar to confidential documents, but ancient books that are yellowed. It stores all the records of the Gu family about the ancestors, including secret rumors, cultivation methods, descriptions of various realms, and a series of materials that are far from the Arabian Nights for mortals. They are also the goals of Liu Chen's trip. After all, any creation must have a basic basis. Yes, he wants to create a cultivation technique, a special cultivation technique specially used for foundation building. It is not what he needs, but what the world needs. At least, he wants to make them feel that they need it. The matter of Shenmian Mountain is still fermenting, and the speed of the internet spread is 1 point faster than Liu Chen expected. Although the government is confused, it has also launched action, and it is indeed outstanding when it has not caused any definite losses. Power is being continuously instilled into the body through the link with the clone, and the powerful feeling fills every cell, which is enough to make an ordinary person lose control of himself. However, he was born with the ability to perfectly control his body, just like controlling a sophisticated machine. This is a unique talent that allows Liu Chen to not get lost due to physical reasons under any circumstances. ID. As for the mental aspect, he doesn't seem to be very normal. In short, everything is ready, and the great world will begin. At this time, 3 full days have passed since the Shenmian Mountain incident, and the various discussions on the internet have long been noisy. However, unlike usual, this time, no so-called experts came out to avoid rumors, and the official did not give any response, and did not even control the remarks in this regard, as if this was just an ordinary celebrity scandal. This ignoring attitude has once again pushed this craze to a new level. There are countless outrageous speculations, and almost all kinds of public discussion platforms are piled up. For Lu Kaiming, this sudden incident not only made him happy, but also gave him a headache. Fortunately, it successfully diverted the attention of the leaders above, so that he no longer has to worry about those weird suicide cases across the country. And the reason for the headache is that he received a more troublesome task: find out the beginning and end of the Shenmianchen incident and give a reasonable explanation. At first, he didn't care much. After all, this kind of trickery has never happened before. Although it is not as exaggerated as this time, it can be considered bizarre, but in the end, with the cooperation of various professional teams, it is often the truth will soon be found out. But this time, it has been 3 full days, and he has not made any progress like last time. The air quality inspection was normal, and no traces of installation equipment were found around the top of the mountain. The environmental survey also completely blocked the possibility of mirages and other natural illusions. Even the so-called hermit master had no news at all. You must know that according to the information obtained from the witnesses, the other party disappeared into the forest, that is to say, the person is most likely still on the mountain, otherwise, he will just go down the mountain. But a large number of people have been searching for 3 days on the mountain, and they have almost turned over the entire Shenmian mountain, but they have not found any trace of it. If it weren't for the fact that all of this was too fantastical, he would even wonder if it was his own competitor and deliberately set him up. Team leader, I have found out. Just when Lu Kaiming was standing in distress, not far away, a man with a dozen documents in his hand ran over with a look of surprise, and what he said instantly made Lu Kaiming come to his senses. Come on, what's the discovery? The visitor was about 27 or 8-year-old, with short black hair. After approaching, he quickly handed the information in his hand to Lu Kaiming. Team leader, you see, I kept checking according to the clue of the hermit from Shenmian Mountain, and activated the internal authority. After eliminating most of the fakes, I really found a special person, the Gu family. Third Master, Gu Qing. Listening to his subordinate's report, Lu Kaiming also hurriedly turned over the information in his hand. Gu Qing, nicknamed Third Master Gu, is of a very high rank in the Gu family. He was obsessed with cultivating immortals since he was a child, and under the impetus of a lot of resources from the Gu family, he seemed to have achieved something in his 30s. 13 years later, he traveled to famous mountains and places of interest all over the world. He returned at the age of 50, and disappeared since then. It is rumored that his last appearance was at the foot of Shenmian Mountain. Looking at this simple document, Lu Kaiming's brows could not help but wrinkle. Gu family, this is definitely a behemoth. Not only are the forces of all parties monstrous, but also because they stood upright during the prince's battle, they have an excellent relationship with the current emperor as well. Moreover, if this Gu Qing was really on the mountain, why did they find nothing after searching for so long? Wait, is it? As if thinking of something, Lu Kaiming hurriedly said to the subordinate in front of him, check it out carefully. Does Li Sheng, who is in charge of the mountain search this time, have anything to do with the Gu family? Hearing his team leader's question, the black-haired man couldn't help showing a hint of pride on his face. Team leader, I've already checked, Li Sheng's former boss is none other than Gu Qing's younger brother, the 6th master of the Gu family, Gu Chong. Gu Chong, the commander-in-chief of the 6th Victory Army of Shenmue Kingdom, has done several effective reforms to the army, and has a high prestige. He is also a ruthless man with enormous power. For this person, Lu Kaiming is still very impressed. Damn it, I said that I couldn't find any clues at all. It turns out that someone is really trying to get in the way. Let's go and find Li Sheng, this bastard. After confirming that someone deliberately made trouble, Lu Kaiming, who had been suppressed for a long time, suddenly became angry. Home care? No matter how powerful they are, the National Security Bureau has never been afraid of anyone. Soon, the menacing two came to the headquarters on the top of the mountain, and inside, a middle-aged man in his 40s was directing his subordinates and seemed to be arranging something. Old Li, you seem to be quite busy, but your people haven't found any clues for so long. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? Looking at the menacing Lu Kaiming, the middle-aged officer who also sensed something was wrong, but there was no panic on his face. He waved his hand calmly, and after the men all went out, he said calmly, "What are you talking about, Team Leader Lu? Your National Security Bureau has dealt with us not once or twice. When have we ever let you down? This time, things are really too miraculous, so the progress is a bit slow, but please rest assured, we will do our best." Seeing the other party's unconcerned appearance in an official manner, Lu Kaiming didn't bother to pretend anymore. He slapped the table directly, and shouted rudely, "Li Sheng, don't do this with me. My people have already checked it out. The one hiding on this mountain is none other than the 3rd master of the Gu family who disappeared many years ago. You must have suffered when you were working here with me. Your old boss Gu Chong's arrangements, tell you, if you don't want to make things worse, you'd better tell me now, Gu Qing zang that." Lu Kaiming's imposing manner was very strong, but to Li Sheng, who was used to seeing big scenes, it was like a breeze blowing his face. Hearing the words, he sat back in the chair in a hurry, with his hands folded in front of him. Group Leader Lu, I don't know who the expert hermit hiding on this mountain is. I feel very inexplicable about what you said. As for Master Gu, I do respect him, but he has never told me anything. I have conveyed any orders. These words of yours are baseless and even slanderous, but I don't want to pursue them. Oh, yes, if you don't believe it, you can go check it out. Li Sheng's old was there, and he was very confident, and Lu Kaiming was so angry that he gritted his teeth for a while. Humph, don't be complacent, without you, I can still find people out. After speaking, he slammed the door angrily and left, and behind him, he could hear Li Sheng's kindness reminder. Leader Lu, the order I received is to control Shenmian Mountain and find out all suspicious elements on the mountain, so during this special period, I will not let any suspicious persons enter this mountain. These words once again stopped Lu Kaiming's footsteps, and then he left here. After leaving the command post on the top of the mountain, his face was already very ugly. Li Sheng's attitude was somewhat unexpected. The other party seemed not at all afraid that he would impeach him on behalf of the National Security Bureau. And if they dare to be so arrogant, I am afraid that these people may have already arranged everything. However, taking a fluke, he still called his own uncle, the current director of the National Security Bureau. 3 minutes later, as the phone hung up, Lu Kaiming's face became even more gloomy. Team leader, what should we do next? Beside the subordinate who was still very proud just now, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com seemed to be cautious even when asking questions. MD. These, are they just for disgusting people? Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! After venting angrily, Lu Kaiming took a deep breath and calmed down his ups and downs. Then he gritted his teeth and said, Isn't this broken mountain so big? Call all our people on the mountain, we will find it ourselves. At this time, Lu Kaiming and others were worried that Gu Qing, who could not be found, also opened their eyes from sitting cross-legged on the stone platform. It's just that at this time, there was no look in his eyes, as if he had lost his soul puppet, until Liu Chen, who was standing in front of him, slowly put down his hand, and a ray of divine light reappeared in those eyes. He turned his head and glanced at Chu Yuling, who was still sleeping beside him. Gu Qing stood up from the stone platform and came to the girl's side. Without showing any pity, he slapped her head together and woke her up. When she woke up, Chu Yuling covered her head, looking at Gu Qing in front of her with some doubts and some grievances. However, what the other party said next made her throw away all her unhappiness immediately. The realm has been stabilized. From today, I will begin to teach you the most basic and most important method of foundation building. Liu Chen, who had already planted the seeds, looked at the two masters and apprentices and didn't wait any longer. He turned around and disappeared completely into the cave. After a few minutes, in a bustling big city, beside a girl with a sad face and long hair, a young man's figure suddenly appeared from the sky, but it didn't attract any attention. And with his arrival, here, I don't know how many people's fate will be quietly changed. It has been 3 full days since her friend was abducted, but so far, there is still no news. As her best friend, Lin Xian has not thought about eating and drinking these days, and her face is full of sadness. Sitting on the bed, she was bored. For some reason, she suddenly had the idea of going out for a walk and relaxing, and she quickly put it into action. After greeting the elders in the family, the ignorant girl directly opened the door that changed her destiny, and walked out unprepared. Behind her, the figure of a young man was slowly dissipating. After wandering aimlessly outside for a long time, Lin Xian, who had kept her head half down, suddenly realized that she had arrived near a bustling entertainment venue at some point. In her childhood education concept, this place is not a good place, so she instinctively wants to stay away. And just when she turned around and was about to go back the same way, not far away, there was a strange voice that stopped her directly. Linzian. Linzian turned around with some doubts, but found that there were 7 or 8 men who looked like gangsters, and they looked very difficult to mess with. She didn't know why these people knew her. Under the instinct of fear, she didn't even dare to lift her legs to escape, she could only watch a few people approaching quickly. That's right, boss, she's Linzian. I saw her in the shop where Chu Yuling's girl worked. It's definitely not wrong. After a few people approached, without waiting for Linzian to speak, one of the lean men spoke with certainty to a middle-aged fat man in his 30s and 40s. Hearing the words, the fat man stepped forward and said in a cold tone, I heard that you have a good relationship with the woman surnamed Chu. I can give you a chance to lead me to find her, and I will let you go. Don't try to play tricks with me, or I will let them take you away. The kind that your parents won't recognize when it's so deformed. Whether the naked threat was concealed in the slightest, and the viciousness that flashed in his eyes made people dare not question the authenticity of his words. Yuling, she's missing, and I don't know where she is now. Looking at the vicious people in front of her, Linzian's face was pale with fright, she stuttered when she spoke, and her weak legs were almost unable to support her slender body. Oh, right. There's no other way. You have to endure it for a while. After all, I can't hold back the fire in my stomach all the time. I have to find someone to vent and take her to box 03. Hearing this, Fatty's face instead showed a smile, but what he said made Linzian tremble all over. Before she could explain or beg for mercy, the subordinates behind Fatty walked forward knowingly, grabbed Linzian's hair, and in her painful cry, pulled desperately to the entertainment place behind him, as if like pulling a person who is about to fall off a cliff, he desperately dragged him backward. The people around who witnessed this scene turned their faces away wisely, completely ignoring the girl's painful cry for help. Seeing these people disappear at the corner of the glass door with Linzian, Lu Chen, who is standing at the top of a building, has no sorrow or joy in his eyes. Every chess piece has its due obligations. As for the ending of the chess piece, he doesn't care. Turning around, his eyes seemed to have crossed the space barrier and looked towards the direction of Shenmian Mountain. The next second, with a gust of evening wind, where he was standing, only a little dust was left, proving that there was a great being standing here just now. At this time, on the top of Shenmian Mountain, about 100 meters high above the clouds, the Holy Emperor Haoshan stood with his hands behind his back, his aura was like a sea, and he was many times stronger than it was a few days ago. His complexion was like water, his eyes glowed faintly, and he lowered his head to look down at the entire Shenmian Mountain. I am afraid that even if there is a Holy Emperor, it is nothing more than that. Suddenly, Haoshan's brows moved slightly, and then, he leaned slightly towards a place, and at the same time whispered, "This deity." Lu Chen's figure slowly appeared. After he nodded indifferently at Haoshan, he asked, "Is the list finalized?" Hearing this, Saint Emperor Haoshan's hands suddenly flashed a dazzling golden light, and then, a scroll of decrees appeared in his hands. There are 36 heavenly immortals, 92 earth immortals, and 18 corpse immortals, each of which has a certain reputation, and plays a relatively important position in the East Territory Haoshan Divine Department, which is enough to help us obtain more power of faith. Looking at the Holy Scroll, Lu Chen stretched out one hand, and the golden decree floated to his palm. After a rough inspection, he found that each person's strength, experience, and control area were recorded in detail. Haoshan is really attentive when it comes to building his own system. More, take some strength from you. Lu Chen said. To create so many immortals at one time, even for him today, it is a bit difficult. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com as much as possible. Haoshan's voice just fell, and as Lu Chen's thoughts moved, the terrifying aura on his body began to decline crazily. In less than 10 seconds, the original stalwart figure seemed to have become a little lower. But fortunately, Liu Chen didn't really plan to it dry. After feeling almost the same, he stopped plundering. It's been about half a month. During this time, if there is any abnormal change, it can be killed. Creating a is a technical task. With the holy voucher in hand, Liu Chen is also preparing to retreat on the spot. After all, there should be no place in this world that is safer than here. Yes. Haoshen's answer was also very concise. But the people who were still searching on Shenmian Mountain didn't know that right above their heads, a mighty divine system was quietly being born. Time is a river that will not stop flowing. No matter what kind of waves are thrown in the middle, it will eventually return to calm. Before he knew it, another week had passed. Liu Chen, who was in the process of creating a in peace, suddenly had a wisp of divine power on his body, and at the speed of crossing time and space, he instantly disappeared in the Shenmian Mountain. In the face of such an abnormality, he nodded secretly in his heart. It seems that the method he created seems to have succeeded. At this time, the Holy Emperor Haoshen, who was quietly supervising Shenmian Mountain, moved slightly, as if he had received some kind of order. I saw the next moment, in his hand, a little golden light quickly condensed and formed, and then shot into Shenmian Mountain. At this time, Lu Kaiming, who was looking for Guqing with his subordinates on the mountain, suddenly felt a burst of soreness in his eyes, and when he lightly rubbed his palms and opened his eyes again, a dark path also appeared in his sight. Inside